Okay, so this session, it's an excerpt from a presentation that I gave last year, but just an approach I take generally to optimization of everything you do. So I'm going to pick a piece out of it around this. So this is user testing, right? So this is using supporter insights to ensure to help you improve your landing pages and improve the experience that supporters have engaging with you. So 54 Degrees, I set up 54 Degrees in 2000. We focus on helping movements and organizations scale their impact. My background is user experience design, so I've been doing it for about 25 years, and I now work on user experience strategy. So I've helped campaigns like the Right to Water movement in Ireland, the Ryanair Cabin Crew campaign, and various other NGOs, some of whom are here. And I have a team of people who help me do a lot of the work. So for me, probably like everybody else in this room, like you do the work that you do because you want to leave an impact on the world in some way. Personally, I've been a little bit obsessed with that over the years. So I went from like local campaigning to national campaigning to international campaigning, and I've trained activists from 65 different countries at this stage. But actually, I've come right back to user experience design where I started out, because having revisited it and revisiting how I approach it, I believe it's the way that I can kind of help organizations have the biggest impact, because I can help organizations double their impact within 12 months using this process. So the process is I start with the visualization of data, checking analytics. I do an expert UX review. So people ask, well, what are the things we should test? I have a 155-point checklist that's backed up by science and years of experience testing things. And I audit a website to identify what those are. Then I support that with user testing, unmoderated tests, and moderated to user tests. They're the things I'm going to talk about today. These other methods of testing and doing your research are also part of the scope of work that I do, but primarily user testing. So why user testing? Simply, usability issues kill conversions. So you lose people, you lose supporters, and it's the easiest way to scale your impact is to get rid of those mistakes. Just stop doing them. This was an article that goes back to 2000 from a guy called Nielsen, who anybody who's in the UX space would know. But this formula shows that if you're, it's kind of obvious in a way, but if you're not doing any testing, you're getting no evidence. So at the very best, you're standing still and not improving. But it could be a lot worse. You could be repeating and repeating really bad mistakes all the time, and you could actually be kind of damaging where you're going. So this shows that if you even test with one person, you can learn up to like a third of the mistakes that most people will encounter as they go through your website. If you go up to 5 tests, you've uncovered about 85% of the issues that you're going to find. You can continue on to 15 users, 15 tests, where you'll likely get all of the issues. But his recommendation, mine also, would be to, rather than test with a single item or single issue with like 15 testers, you're better off doing 3 tests with 5. So test, iterate, test, and then you have, it's a much better way of doing it. So I'm going to talk through just running moderated user tests. So by moderated, I mean you're present with the person when they're testing it. And by present, it's like 2023 present. So it could be over Zoom, or it could be over a call rather than actually sitting with them. 20 years ago, if you wanted to do user testing, you had to hire out a usability lab. It was really expensive, very prohibitive. It's not. You can do this in a DIY fashion, so I'll walk through how you can do this. First thing is you're present, so you're sitting there with them. And the advantage of that is that you can observe their facial reactions, their body language. Lots of things that you can't see if you just hire somebody to do it and you're not present. And body language and facial expressions give a lot away. And you can identify the issues. So the issues are generally broken down into the kind of terms we use are friction. So what you want to avoid are friction and abandonment. Friction is where somebody hesitates. So they're having a problem with a particular field on a form and they get frustrated. If that happens enough times, people abandon, they leave. So what you're looking for is friction as you're observing them, like what's frustrating them, what's slowing them down, and they're the things that you note. And as you note with different testers, you sort of accumulate. If a particular issue is experienced by 5 users, that's obviously more important than one that's experienced with 1 user, and you can begin to rank them like that. So I am going to speak pretty fast, but I hope clearly, because usually this is an hour-long workshop, and we've got 30 minutes. So, and Ben's pointing at me. So there are 5 simple steps, and I think it's fairly straightforward, and hopefully I'm able to communicate that to you today. The first thing is identify the high-value pages that you want to run your tests on. Recruit participants. So I'm going to talk to you how to do that. Give them a specific task to perform, observe, record, and review the results, and then iterate and test again. So the last thing is really important, because if you're just doing the first 4, all you're doing is identifying problems, and that's just a really negative experience. So unless you're going to identify the problems, change the design, and improve the experience, you may as well not do it at all. So the high-value pages. This may vary, but generally, and this applies to A/B testing as well. So generally, like A/B testing requires a lot of volume through particular pages. So you're looking for the pages that, one, deliver the highest value. So if you're focused on fundraising, it's going to be either your donation form or the pages immediately prior to that, the pages that direct people to the actual donation form itself. Campaign landing pages, be it like a quiz, a petition, an email to target, they're your acquisition funnels. So that's where you're going to bring most people in. So you should really focus on that. And then perhaps it's your homepage. Perhaps you want to track how people find their way to those landing pages or to other actions on your website. And it may be your homepage. It isn't always your homepage. It can be Google, it can be social, it can come from any direction. And obviously the reason for high value is if you do it on these pages, you get a higher benefit from it. And it affects your bottom line. So who should you recruit? So here's the thing. I mentioned you could do usability labs, but you don't need to. I could do it in the cafe upstairs on the 4th floor. I could do that after lunch. Here's the thing. A lot of usability issues are really obvious to most people. They don't have to be your audience or specific to you. So you can literally grab somebody in a cafe, you could grab your friends if you share an apartment, you could do it in the hallway, wherever you want, a random person, sit them down in front of it, and they probably identify a lot of the issues. People who are not web savvy, that's really valuable because those people are less experienced at using technology, using the web in general. So they're likely to encounter issues that more experienced users won't encounter. So like if I'm testing something, I've encountered most of the problems that you'll have with forms. I'll probably identify before I even get to the field what the issue is going to be. But, and I have one study later where we worked with older people and the value we got from doing that. The third one is, yes, you will get higher value from people who represent your target audience or your specific demographic. And I'll talk about maybe how you can recruit those people. You want to get more specific about the type of people who are testing it, and you want them to be representative of your target audience. So it makes sense that people who come to your website or on your website or using your website are more likely to share your values or be interested in what you're doing than people who are not. So you can use these are pop-ups, and you keep it really simple. It's a yes or no question. But what you're hoping to do is to intercept them at a crucial point so that they can basically give you their details, and then you can kind of follow up and set up the user testing with them. I think some of the more valuable places you can do it is like after so let's say they've taken a petition but they haven't made a donation. That could be a good point to do it because you can then interview them about, well, why did you not make the donation at that point? Or actually go through it again and ask them to do it. And this is there's another one where I have mixed views on. So sometimes you'd say, well, there's no point in interviewing people who have already completed a task, like making a donation, because they've been through it. So they've likely overcome any usability issues that might be on the page. But in another way, if you can do it like relatively quickly after they've made the donation, it's fresh in their mind, and they'll remember it, and they'll remember the issues and the problems that they had. So that's really valuable feedback you can get. Whatever other way, you need to be persuasive. So in the commercial sector, they offer incentives like Amazon vouchers and things like that. You can phrase the request in a way, I don't know, maybe you want to give a branded t-shirt from your organization, something like that. Or maybe you just pull on their goodwill, and maybe they're most likely willing to do it. Aside from the pop-ups on your website, organizations are always looking for interesting actions that their supporters can take. And we've talked about daisy chaining actions where someone makes, signs a petition, then you give them a quiz or a survey, and you have a sequence of emails. So I'd say, why not send an email out to a segment of your supporters asking them, would they be willing to give 10 minutes of their time to do user testing? It's a great way to get up close and personal with your supporters. Okay, so if you're running tests and they're not your target audience, so these are kind of the more random people, I'm going to go with the bottom one first. So, excuse me. So kidding is like encourage criticism and stay quiet, right? Because it's really tempting. And when I started, you're doing as well. They're doing it and they're making mistakes, and there's this urge to go, no, no, no. Look, that's not how you do it. This is how you do it, right? So you can't do that, right? You have to let them find their own way through it. If it gets to a point where they're literally stuck, you treat that, okay, that's an abandonment. They're not going to get through the form, and then you can give them a prompt and take them through it. But the thing about encouraging criticism is important too, because like as a user experience designer, you can get a little bit precious about what you've created, and you sort of transfer the idea that the people testing it are a bit stupid, and that's really unfair. Like, so you're literally going like, what are you doing? Like, what's wrong with you? Why do you not? It's right there in front of you. But if you get into that frame of mind, you actually have to flip it right back and say, well, we were tasked with designing an experience that would encourage them and motivate them to take this specific action, and if they're not doing it, then I'm the stupid one. So that thing is really, really important. But after that, you've heard of things like method acting, like Robert De Niro, where they get into character for it. So think about it like that. You can tell them, okay, you're like a middle-aged woman who's on a high income, you've never given to charity before, and you can get as detailed as you want on that and try and get them into that frame of thinking. And then you present a scenario. So the scenario could be, you've just signed a petition and you've landed on this page. Or it could be, you've just received an email from the organization asking you to sign a petition, and you've landed on this page. So you give them a very specific scenario so that they can make their best efforts to get into the mindset of the target audience that you're aiming for. And then be really specific with the task. So, you know, if you have a donation form with like multiple options and you give them a random amount to give, right? That will test, for example, if they're going to use the other field, or how do they do it. And it will do things like asking for a monthly donation versus a single donation. You know, you should be specific about the exact amount and the donation type you want them to do. Okay, recording results. So these are some tools. So there's just some tips here. So there's a bunch of these, and you probably have one that you use yourself. So Camtasia and TextMid Capture allow you to do video recordings. So that's useful if you're sitting beside somebody, like in a cafe or in the hallway, and you can use those to record it. It's really useful to have them recorded so you can look back at them later. So you might like record 5 tests, and something comes up in the 5th one, and it jogs your memory about something that happened in the first one that you want to check back on. So recording, it's really important. With remote sessions, whatever you use, like if it's Teams, Zoom, Jitsi, all of those tools have the ability to record your screen. And then the other one, keep it simple. Like I have spreadsheets. It's a particular formatted spreadsheet where I track it, I rate it, I rank it, and I note if it's an issue that occurred more than once. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So this one here was this was a petition targeted at older people to convince the government not to cut the state pension during budget time, and they decided to cut it. So the issue was that the conversion rate was lower than expected. Nobody was filling out this comment field. So we sat down with some older people and we asked them to go through it, and our observations were that the friction was created because a lot of them didn't know what they were supposed to do, what the comment was, right? We didn't suggest that. Seems obvious now. So we added these moderated comments. We collected, I don't know, about 50 of them, and we weren't moderating them, we were just displaying random ones each time. So it looked like it was kind of live and different each time. And the result was like a 30% increase in conversion rates, and 64% of people filled out those comments. Some of those comments led to, they were used in policy submissions and different things later. Okay, so I'm going to do this quick. So unmoderated pretty much is you're not sitting beside them. So there are services you can pay to run user tests for you, okay? And there are platforms where you sign up, you pay some money, and they recruit the participants, they do the recordings, you just have to kind of assign the tasks. When I say affordable, like some of them are as low as $5, some are more expensive, but relative to the potential benefits you're going to see, I think they're all relatively affordable because you're going to be generating more revenue from it. I would say disadvantages, like it might sound like an oxymoron, the professional testers are a disadvantage, but it's because they're testing every single day, so they're used to encountering issues, so they're more likely not to observe them than people who are less experienced. And they're also, it's hard to get your specific target audience, because a lot of those services are geared towards commercial operations where people shop and buy products. But in terms of, there's a bunch of them there listed. I don't have time to go through each of them, but if you want to just get started and try something out, UserBob costs $25 for 5 testers. It's really affordable. There's no monthly fees. You can just do it as once off. And then there's Usability Hub where you can, their free version gives you like 15 testers, but it's 2 minutes duration, so just for shorter tasks. Okay, to give you an idea of the type of things we also uncovered, so this was following an expert review with Compassion World Farming. I'd identified that this postcode field was causing issues because people were they entered their address and then they select their postcode, and the postcode started inputting information into the address fields, and it was just like correcting itself, and it was quite confusing. And also the error fields on it weren't doing what they should. So we implemented those error fixes. These are standard. Ben's looking at me. I can't explain each one of them. Basically, that first A/B test following the expert review and the other user research we did led to a 5.2% increase in conversion rates, which is really significant when you're an organization that's taking in a lot of donations online. So other things, this is another video recording we did. This organization was expecting more bookings. They couldn't understand why bookings were lower on mobile. So this was the first video recording where you see this cookies display. And when we got rid of it, like the book now was a sticky footer at the bottom that was hidden by it. So we moved the cookies display up there, right? It's really obvious when you see it. But I actually missed that the first time around myself because I went to the home page, got rid of the cookies, and I wasn't seeing it on the landing page. User testing and engaging networks. First thing is like you make sure your page isn't in live mode. I'm pretty sure it's new. I don't set these up in my team anymore, but it is new, isn't it? Yeah, it is new. And also you have test transactions. So make sure that your gateway in donation, so this is all in the admin settings of the individual page, not like cog that you click on. So make sure that your payment gateways are also in test mode. And then you can, there's test card numbers for Stripe and other payment gateways. They're on the payment providers' websites. They're also in the Engaging Networks subportal, which you should use. It's very good. We go there ourselves. We send clients there when they ask us questions that are there sometimes. That's kind of it, speedily. But I'll just do this because people ask me, like, what do you do and how can you help? So in this term, so the expert review is a way that you can get like actionable insights that you can test or implement straight away. So with RNID, for example, they implemented one recommendation and they jumped from a 49% to a 70% opt-in. We did an expert review and the optimization program where we taught them how to use those different testing methodologies so they can implement them themselves. And the first test there led to a 5.2% increase, which like covered the cost of the project many times over. And or you could just go for a full redesign. So we designed templates for engaging networks where we've implemented all of these solutions. So all the things we talk about, what do you test? Why should we test it? Let's just get to a point where we're not talking about that anymore. Like they're all pretty obvious. So we can just do that and implement those kind of tried and trusted usability recommendations straight away. And with Project Aware, this is a case study that's on the Engaging Networks website. I think that's wrong, actually. It was 68% single, but I think it's actually 187% increase in monthly donations after the redesign and going through the testing process. So Ben, am I still allowed to take questions?
Yeah, tons of time. Yeah.
Cool, okay.
We'll do a whole Q&A here. I'll grill you here for like 15 minutes. So
15?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so are you familiar with the concept of a Norman door? Is that something that's okay, so what a Norman door is, and I'm sure you all have ran into this in your life, is you're approaching a door and you have no idea how to interact with the door, right? Do you push it? Do you pull it? Is it automatic? Does it slide to the left? Does it slide to the right? Is it a revolving door somehow that you don't understand, right? And so a Norman door is named after this MIT professor, Dan Norman, who is kind of the father of human-centered design and usability studies, all that kind of work, right? And so watching your speech here this year and last year, you know, and just kind of reflecting more on that and how can we kind of take those, you know, core ideas of usability and make them really accessible for kind of every nonprofit. So I asked you the same question last year, so I'll ask you again this year. You got one thing, and what are you gonna do when someone comes to you and says, I'd like to start somewhere. I'm
Yeah.
going to start with.
Yeah, okay, so I have two answers, so there's not one. But
There's never just one.
the first one is the number of times I've started working with an organization. The first thing I do is I look at the data, and that's across email, social, landing pages, and then I visualize that into a funnel. And that gives you a visualization of the different steps of the user experience. So they're receiving emails, X amount are clicking through, the conversion rates are that amount, the conversion rates in that page are that amount. So sometimes you can look at it and you can immediately go, your problems with email. Okay, your problems with email because your click-through rates are like 4%. If you can increase that to 8%, you're literally doubling your impact, right? Because you've doubled the amount of people that are going to the landing page, and if everything else remains constant. A lot of the time the data isn't set up correctly, so people are making decisions based on bad data. Right, so you really need to get your data sorted out and your analytics and your tracking sorted out. But then, like, this is slightly self-serving, the expert review, because like that's literally all the things I've encountered over the last 25 years in one report, and it just gives you a lot of things. It's ranked and listed, so you can literally implement things straight away, and they'll get a guaranteed result, or you can A/B test them depending on what the chances are of it.
Well, and I think what a lot of charities or agencies or really anybody, what you end up running into, if you and your team are the ones that are doing all of your testing on all of your pages, you're not going to spot the normal errors that your average supporter is going to do, right? Because if it's your digital team testing your pages, they're probably highly competent in the digital space, and they're doing things like clearing cookies, right? When they land on a page, clicking like, no, I don't want cookies anywhere. Most people don't click that, right? Like, you can do studies to find out how many people, but that would be something you'd want to test, right? Because if you were to find out that a majority of folks that are landing on your page actually aren't running cookies, which, I mean, they'll go away soon anyway, that would make you think, like that blocker that was showing up, maybe your testers are also going to see that because your testers are turning things off. So little things like that can go a really long way when you're actually trying to find those errors that are showing up.
Yeah, for sure. And like the reason I picked out this out of all the other types of studies is it's really enjoyable doing it. You get so many really useful insights relatively quickly. So like, for example, we talk a lot about A/B testing, right? To run an A/B test, my kind of default sort of like, you need about 1,000 transactions on the A and the B, right? That's just a figure I have in my head. That's a lot of donations. So some organizations aren't even like taking in that amount of transactions. But with user testing, so if you set that up and you need to get 1,000 transactions, you could be waiting 6 months for a statistically significant result. With a user test, you can do it in 10 minutes, and you can encounter some of the issues that are really obvious. The other thing is, you will see things that really surprise you. You're looking at the same pages every day, you think they're fine, you will see things that are really obvious, and there'll be those moments where you can do it. So try that too.
Yeah, I mean, I know, and I'm not going to put Marta on the spot unless she wants to come up here, but we did a bunch of usability testing with our new marketing tools, where we literally had clients, we got on Zoom with them, we said, please complete this task, send an email, and that's it. And then you just watch them attempt to send an email in your new tool, and you're like, how can you not see that you just click on that button? It's right there. Just click on that button. And you're sitting there you can't say anything because that would ruin the usability testing, right? But it makes it so obvious when you see somebody else in there, you're like, oh, I see why that isn't obvious, that is the button you should click to do that thing, especially because these are people who were coming off of an old tool of ours, and they're just like, yeah, how do I make the query that I'm used to making? Like, where is that thing I used to click all the time, right? And so, a lot of it, especially if you're moving from one thing to the other, can be really useful to do that kind of usability testing. And not just on your donation pages, right? This also goes for your employees internally, right? How much time are you taking when you're doing new tool rollouts, new page rollouts, those kind of things, to train your internal staff to make sure that flow is consistent through there? A lot of times HR all of a sudden will be like, here's your new expense reporting software. And you'll be like, I don't know what to do with any of this, right? And so it's not just something for your supporters, but something to think internally as you organize yourselves.
Yeah, sure. I think also, I did emphasize that it doesn't have to be expensive. You can do this like with your own laptop, your own tools, in your own space. But maybe I was even asked this question this morning, but it was asked a lot, like, what do you test? Like, what should you test first? And I mentioned the high-value pages, but just get an idea of where it fits into a process. So, like, that's where I fit it into a process of analyzing a user experience across the supporter journey and I use user tests to validate the expert review and other data that I'm collecting. But the other place you can use it is like if you're designing a landing page or you're just redesigning your website, is to just design. People are familiar with wireframes, I presume, where you just have like sketches of what the page looks like, but do it with real content and real copy, because usually it's the copy that converts. So if you do it in wireframes with real copy and test with real users and they read it, you learn how effective your copy is at motivating people, because all the distractions like colors and design and branding and visuals are removed. But also it's really easy to iterate that. It's much easier to change a wireframe than it is to go in and redesign a page that's coded on a website and integrate it with CMS or engaging networks. Yeah. So do it early and do it often.
And just remember, most errors aren't human errors, they're design errors. Like the design wasn't done well enough for the human to get through it, right? And that's where usability testing can be very helpful, because that's like an actual human looking at your design, seeing what's going on and being like, oh yes, look at this obvious error in your design. It wasn't the human who made the mistake, right? It was the design that wasn't ready for the human to interact with it in the way they wanted to interact with it.
Yeah,
is an opinion from my side of the stage. It might not be from his side of the stage.
No, it's good. I think I did mention like to encourage criticism. When you're sitting beside, like this applies to focus groups as well, but when you're sitting beside somebody and you're asking them to review something that's yours, they're going to be polite, right? And they're going to be kind, and they may not even tell you the truth, right? So you need to encourage criticism. So a way of doing that is to say, look, I'm tasked with like bringing in lots of donors, but my designer Ben has designed this and I don't like it. It's not working. So can you be really critical of this? And then they're going, oh, right, okay. So then they're on your side, right? And they're not doing it. So that works as well.
Aaron asked, what was used to create the "Have you got 10 minutes to visit our website" form?
Oh yeah, so there's a bunch of things. I think I used a tool called True Conversion for that, but it's similar to Hotjar, if you're familiar with Hotjar. It does heat mapping, it does video recordings, and it does those pop-ups as well. I believe there's a not-for-profit license for Hotjar, so you can look into that. If you don't have it running, I'd encourage you to run it on your website in tandem with Google Analytics or whatever else you're doing. So it gives you a lot more data to review in different formats. So you're probably familiar with heat maps, where you can see what parts of the page most people are clicking on. You can do video recordings of people interacting with it. They take time to review. They're very good, but people aren't being given a specific task. So while you can see people interacting with the website, you don't know what they're actually trying to achieve. So they're less valuable than this. But all those different research methodologies combined give you like a really kind of comprehensive picture of where things are going right and where things are going wrong on your website.
Like heat mapping can give you maybe a nice macro area that, oh, we want to focus on why are all these clicks happening like in this area? Like what is going on there? So then you can come in and do usability testing and see why isn't that the click, the heavy amount of clicks in this upper left quadrant leading to XYZ, whatever we actually want to go in and do usability testing on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think one comes to mind. I think I talked about it last year. Was where we had a fundraising website. There were podcasts of celebrities reading children's books, and it was like a Christmas gift you could buy. And some of the kind of feedback we got was like people didn't really understand how it worked. Like, how do podcasts work? Where can I play them? And we added that section to the website, how it works. And then when we looked at the heat maps afterwards, it was the most clicked link on the whole page. So that's evidence that the test we did to uncover the issue, and then we used heat maps to kind of validate the kind of implementation that we went with then as well.
What are the most common usability issues to look out for? Which is a hard question. Let's say, what are the most common usability issues to look out for on a standard donation page?
Yeah. Okay, so when you're designing a donation page, there's a few things you need to bear in mind. So, and there's psychological principles as well as user experience principles. So user experience tends to focus on like form fields and how easy they are to complete and how easy they are to use. So, is the information you're asking for clear, and are you clear on why you're asking for it? So, we've done a couple of implementations recently of wallets. So the advantage of wallets is kind of really quick express payments. And then the client insists on collecting all of the address fields. But you don't need to collect the address fields to make those payments. So there's in the user's head, they're going, oh, I want to do my wallet payment. And then they're asking for all these additional information. That can create friction. There's basic kind of principles around designing forms. You see sometimes what they call field labels. So it's the text that explains what a field is for. And sometimes you see that above the field. Sometimes you see it in the field. What we use, if we do that, they're called adaptive placeholders. So when you click on it, the label kind of moves to the top of the field. Have you seen that? But some forms you'll see that when you click on it and you enter the information, the label disappears. It's not visible anymore. So then the user looks at the form and they get an error, but they can't see the label of the field anymore, and it's just really, really confusing. So don't do that. Generally, kind of bigger fields, bigger buttons work. If you're asking for information, be clear why. So I'm trying to persuade one client at the moment when I asked them, why are you asking for address fields? And they were, well, we need it to process gift aid. And I was going, okay, well then can we not just display it when they say they want to give you gift aid? Like, or why don't you ask for it after they actually process the donation? So like remove the address fields from the donation form and get the money and then ask them for the additional information, because you're going to incentivize them to do it, because you're going to send something really interesting to them.
I just saw a shudder go through the major gift officer crowd here in attendance.
So you're looking at, but yeah, trust and credibility is a key one. So, you know, there's kind of visual things like HTTPS, having padlocks displayed on your page, but also just like, what are you doing with the money? Like, where do you invest the money that's given? So kind of stories demonstrating the value of the donation. I'm pretty sure there's another presentation from before up on the Engaging Networks website.
Yeah. I mean, one thing, if you're interested to look into some things more, you can look into the study of what are called signifiers and affordances, which are two concepts on how we move people through something that we've designed, right? And how we can use these two topics to signify, like a form field. You should put your first name here because it says form field. But then, like you were saying, if you're then making that more difficult by restructuring that page and what someone just saw on there, that can make it very difficult to kind of, and it's just going to add friction to your overall experience.
Yeah.
And we want to remove friction as much as possible, which can always be a fight with internal teams. And I think that's where, you know, you were talking about trust, not just your supporters, but your internal teams as well, right? You know, you should really know all of the people on your finance team, right? Because they're going to want to say, well, we need a £5 minimum on this page to prevent fraud. And you're going to say, well, £5, you can actually look at the data and see a lot of our leadership level donors started as a 4.5 pound donor, right? So we don't want to have a £5 minimum, right? But you need to have those relationships. You can talk internally with folks as well. This doesn't, I think what I'm trying to get is what Eugene is talking about here doesn't just stop at how your page looks. It can also impact your organizational design and how you're working in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the form fields, so some donation forms, for example, you just have like a background image and you have the form fields. In my experience, splitting it into different steps increases conversion rates because it seems less intimidating. You're asking for less information first, and then you kind of proceed through. You see the steps 1, 2, 3, and you'll often see like details, amount, donate. That can work. The other thing I would say, and this is just around the persuasiveness, is this is important before they even get to that key page. Like if you're sending people to a donation page and you haven't been persuasive before they get there, they're less likely to complete it. So the pages that lead them onto those key pages are equally important. Your Facebook ads are equally important. Your emails are equally important. So you need to apply this right across the whole funnel.
Yeah. How are you making yourself part of their consideration sets as they're trying to decide who they're going to donate to? Those kind of conversations, I think, sometimes get lost when you're just like, we just need a pretty page. And it's like, well, pretty pages only go so far. Because if you can't get anyone to your pretty page, then it doesn't matter how it looks. I have seen what people would describe as very plain looking pages do phenomenally well because they have demonstrated impact throughout before they ask that gift.
Yeah, I think one came to mind as you were saying it. So there was a donation page working on, there was a testimonial from a celebrity. There's no need to mention who it was, but we were doing the moderated user test. So we're sitting in front of the people who were testing it. And they read it and they're going like, yeah, I like her. This is an older person. I like her, but I'm not sure that, like, you know, everybody else does, right? And then when I asked, well, are there any other celebrities that you've tested? The answer was no. So that was never tested, whether that celebrity was actually suppressing or increasing conversion rates. So the detail is important.
I got a few more questions here from Christina. Are there any common issues you find on charity websites or on charity websites that keep coming up in user testing? Commonality is over 25 years of doing this.
Yeah, loads. 155 of them, to be precise. No, there are a lot. Okay, it's not particularly a usability thing, but but it's an experience thing. Organizations talk about themselves a lot. The language of like, help us do this instead of like together we can do this, right? So just focusing on the user full stop and focusing on their experience of interacting with you. I think like if a supporter walked into a room, well, let's put it this way, like if you're getting like 1,000 visitors per month, we'll say, right? Would you treat them the same way if they walked into your office as you're currently treating them on your website? By just kind of stuffing information down their throats that's irrelevant, untargeted. Generally, there's that. In terms of the usability issues, I'm surprised the number of kind of forms that are designed wrong, and they're just not up to like basic standards. I think sometimes there's often a failure to focus on building that trust and credibility. One of the most common questions, well, there's a lot of distrust in charities at times. It's like, well, CEOs get paid way too much. My view is, yeah, they do, but like they do a lot of hard work. But so donors have those questions. If I give you that money, what are you going to do with it? So that can be, you can build that trust and credibility by like telling your stories of impact, like the impact of the donation and what it can do. There was one donation page where we changed the language that we used to describe how the money was spent. So instead of saying, we spend your money on, and I've seen organizations, there's 15% of our money is spent on fundraising, for example. So we kind of looked at it differently, and we said, well, actually, like all the money that's raised goes towards making this work. And it was split into how much of it goes to like the 3 programs that the organization was doing. And, that wasn't an easy, it was like, a paragraph on the landing page, but that wasn't an easy thing for the organization to make a decision on. But it did influence it. It was like all your money is going towards these programs. There's that. Yeah, that's all I can think of right now.
I'll say the number one thing that I see. There's this principle in design called Cowan's Law. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And so Cowan's Law says that eventually every company's website or organization's website will look like the internal teams that make up that organization, right? So a great example is if you go to a bank website 4 or 5 years ago, it would have like commercial lending, real estate lending, credit cards, personal savings, personal checking, and those are all the individual departments at the bank. The consumer doesn't care about your internal structure, right? And I think that can be very difficult at charities when you have lots of competing programmatic areas, when you have lots of different internal teams who want to be reflected on that website. But it's really coming down to what is the purpose of your website? What is it supposed to do? And it's supposed to tell a story that is supposed to be impactful to the person who's landing there. And having a bunch of headers across the top that I can go to all these different places and see all these things, that isn't what the supporter, the consumer, that's not what they want, right? You need to put yourself in the mindset like of the consumer. That's where usability testing can be very helpful, right? You're asking someone to donate, they land on your page, and there's not a big button up in the right-hand corner, and they start clicking through things, they need to click 4 times to get to a donation page. That's very unfriendly, and you're not working towards what like your end goal actually is.
Yeah, I think one that came to mind there, error handling is a significant one. So errors come up when there's friction, right? So first of all, your fields should be labeled in a really clear way so that you don't have errors. Because once you have errors, you'll see those red fields. Sometimes they're just handled with like a list of errors at the top of the page, but you need to bring people to the first field where that error occurred, make it clear what the error is. So sometimes you see like technical explanations of what the error is. That's useless to somebody. Like you need to be really clear in plain English what it is.
Seeing payment gateway error 17431
yeah,
isn't
something
helpful
like
to that
that.
user.
Yeah. Like no one should see a 404 error either, or a 503. But also I think I think the kind of some of the basic or kind of guiding principles of user experience design are to keep the user in control. Like don't force them to do things that they haven't chosen to do, right? So, but also kind of keep them informed in advance so they can make those decisions. So, for example, I've seen a lot of donation forms where you ask people, do they want to make a single donation or a monthly donation? And they get clicked monthly and they fill out their address. And then they get to the third screen and it's only then that you tell them that it's direct debit only. And like if it's a credit card, most people have that on them, but you don't generally like kind of know your bank details off the top of your head. So to me, you put in all the effort to get them to that point and then they're going, all right, I have to go and get my bank details. I don't have them. I'll do it by credit card. Oh, you can't do it by credit card and you're losing it. So a really simple thing would be to tell them. like make a monthly donation by direct debit. You'll need your bank details to do this. Like, so before they kind of go into it, they're kind of pre-warned and you haven't wasted their time. Now you can say that creates friction too, but at least you're helping them before they encounter the real problem, and rather than kind of getting to the end and then getting frustrated.
Yeah, and I think what you're shifting there from is like in the world of like errors, there are what are called mistakes and what are called slips. And so understanding like what a mistake is, which is action-based, versus a slip, which is knowledge-based, understanding which of those two errors you're actually dealing with. So presenting someone up front, oh, we only do ACH on this page. They can't make, right? They can make a slip error where they get to the end and they have forgotten that thing, but they can't make an action error, right? Because they're like, oh, right, I knew at the beginning that this was an ACH only page because you told that to me. So I think understanding how those errors like interplay with each other can really help you make sure that you're designing things in a way that makes sense for the people that you're trying to get to give you money, take an action, or sign up on a form.
Yeah.
Anything else to wrap up with?
No, that's been fairly thorough, I think.
I think so. Well, thank you, Eugene.
Okay, thank you.